big hello and welcome. This session is being recorded, so we will put it on our YouTube channel after the fact. So if you want to come back and watch it again, you are more than welcome to, but hopefully we will all get through the content and understand what we are up to today. I just want to start off by talking about who should be here. This session is for English medium schools. So we do have a Welsh medium session that is running as well. So if you think that you would be better placed in the Welsh medium session, please do make yourself known in the chat and we can send you the link to that. It is also a repeat of this session that happened in September. So if you're an English medium senior mentor and you attended this session in September, where we talked all about the professional learning that you are going to do for your mentors in school, then this is going to be a repeat of the content. You are, of course, more than welcome to stay for this repeat, but it might be that you want to save your time and remind yourselves of your notes from the September session. So we are for English medium senior mentors who didn't attend in September. So today we are being led by our Mentor Leads team. So there are 3 of us on the team this year. My colleague Kerry Bevan, who works in our secondary MFL team. Myself, I'm Sian Wickersham. I work on the primary PGCE and I'm a former primary school teacher. And then I'm joined on the call as well by Fiona Heath-Diffie, who is one of our secondary PE leads. We also have the wonderful Liz Morris. I can see she's here on the screen as well, who is one of our senior mentors from one of our lead schools, who is going to be helping us out and doing a bit of facilitation for us as well. Then the final person I want to introduce is the wonderful Rachel Newby, who is part of our Cardiff Partnership team, and the email address there, the ite@cardiffmet.ac.uk email address, is where you can get in touch with that team if you've got any questions around technical issues or access to things. That email address is there on the board as well. And it wouldn't be right to start this session without expressing our deep appreciation for you all, our senior mentors. So everything that you do is absolutely central to the success of the Cardiff Partnership. Your expertise, your commitment and your care for our student teachers and the mentors in your school make a real difference, not just to their development, but ultimately to the future of the teaching profession. And we know that at the moment we're all incredibly time poor, and often you're juggling teaching, leadership, mentoring, senior mentoring responsibilities. And yet we know that you consistently give your all to supporting the student teachers. And that generosity of time and spirit really doesn't go unnoticed, and we're truly grateful. Year on year, we get such wonderful feedback from our student teachers, and this just doesn't happen by accident. It's all down to the hard work of our senior mentors and mentors in schools. It's the check-ins, the meetings, the observations, the directions around school, the quiet encouragement, the honest and open conversations, and the time that you give so generously that all contribute to their success. And I know that as a university tutor and a member of the team here, the student teachers all speak so highly of their time in school, and they speak so highly of you all. So a huge thank you for all of the work that you've done, that you are doing, and that you continue to do moving forward onto this next placement. And again, I just want to say it really doesn't go unnoticed. We really, really appreciate it. So the bulk of this professional learning session today is going to be all about delivering professional learning for mentors in school. And within that, there are a couple of little updates. So if you haven't had student teachers with us before, or if you haven't had student teachers on the first placement this year, there's a couple of tiny little things that have changed that I'm going to go through with you as well. But ultimately, we're talking about what professional learning do mentors in your school need. For new mentors, so people who are brand new to mentoring with Cardiff Met, the process remains exactly the same as it has always been. There was an online session that happened last week. Hopefully your new mentors attended. If they didn't attend, it is recorded and is on our YouTube channel. And if one of my colleagues could put the YouTube channel link in the chat, that would be really helpful. So for new mentors, there was an online session that happened last week, or they can watch the session that has been recorded. We also as I was talking about with Anthony earlier, we have a session for new mentors coming up in a couple of weeks' time at the beginning of February as well. So if you've got any new mentors, particularly if your new mentors are working on the BA programme, so their student teachers haven't started yet, you might want to sign them up to come along to that session as well. Then, for the all mentors, so the professional learning that every single mentor in school receives, we had quite a lot of feedback over the last year that one of the things that is really, really difficult is getting all mentors together at the same time. So in previous years, what we've done is we've had a session a bit like this for all mentors, and we've had everybody come along to an online session or watch it as a video recording afterwards. But the feedback that we've had from schools was that it's becoming increasingly difficult to get all of your mentors all together at the same time, and that sometimes that was causing difficulties for school timetables and for senior mentors as well. So this year, we've designed the All Mentors training session to be flexible. Now, with flexibility can sometimes come a little bit of confusion, I think. So I'm going to try and be super clear, and then I'm going to pop over to the chat and see if there are any questions about this. You have got a choice of how you would like to deliver this All Mentors session. It can be run asynchronously. So your mentors can work through the slides, and we've designed the slides so that they give enough guidance on how to work through them. And your mentor can receive those slides and they can work through them independently. Or if you want to lead it in school as a group session, you can do that. So you are still able to, because I know lots of senior mentors really like to get all of their mentors in a room and talk to them all together. You can use those slides as a group in school and deliver it like a more traditional professional learning session. So you've got a choice. You can lead it as a group, or you can send it to your mentors and they can access it on their own asynchronously. If you choose to let them access it asynchronously, then it's important to check and follow up with them as to how they engage with that. Have they done it? And which focus did they pick? Because they've got a little bit of choice as to what focus they're going to pick. And I'm going to cover that in a minute. So if you send it out to them and say, do this in your own time, mentors, make sure that you've planned to get them all together at some point to have a bit of a chance to talk through it. But that option can give you the flexibility to perhaps do that a couple of weeks into term starting. So hopefully that will be helpful. You're not trying to get everybody together before the student teachers start. It could happen a little bit in the future. Your university tutor will follow up with you about this. So they'll probably talk to you about how did you deliver the professional learning? Did you send it out asynchronously, or did you do it as a group all together? I want to show you where to find these resources on our team site. One thing to say here is that my colleagues and I, right now, we're not going to be able to troubleshoot everybody's Teams access right now. So I'm really sorry if this causes any sort of stress with you thinking, oh no, I haven't got access to that. But I want to show you where you can find them. And hopefully those of you that do have access, this will be helpful for. If you haven't got access, you've got that ITE email address to email, and also your university tutor will follow up with you as well. So when I go on to Teams, this is what my Teams looks like here. And you can see I've got lots of these different teams that I'm a part of, and it's this one that we're looking for, the Cardiff Partnership for Initial Teacher Education. Now, sometimes, depending on what login you've used, this might be hiding from you. So if we look up here, can you see my cursor, hopefully, where my little face is? If I click on that, you can see that I've got Hub, Swansea University and the Open University here as well. So for some of you, say if I click on my Hub one, and then if I go backwards, so I'm on my Hub one, so some of you might be logged into Hub. If I go backwards, and then I can see Cardiff Metropolitan University. So that is the one that I need to click on. And then when I'm here, I'm going to go into the Cardiff Partnership for Initial Teacher Education. And the channel that you're looking for is Mentors and S Mentors. So again, if you can't see it, it could be one of your hidden channels. So here are my hidden channels, the ones I don't use on a daily basis. It might be in there. Mentors and S Mentors. I tried to get Senior Mentors in there, but with the Welsh translation, it was too long to be a Teams title. So I'm afraid we're just S Mentors. So I'm going to click on that. And then they've changed the Files tab to be called Shared. So you're going to click on Shared. And here you can see a whole heap of files and folders. And the one that you're looking for is purple and right at the top. So 2025-26 Professional Learning for Senior Mentors and Mentors. And when I click in here, and you see the one that says All Mentors. So in All Mentors, you've got the slide, so All Mentor Professional Learning English Medium, and then you've got the documents in here. And if I go into Spring and English Medium, these are all of the documents that we're going to talk about and share today. Okay, we're also going to try and pop some of these things into the chat as well as we go. So if you haven't got access and you're struggling to open things, hopefully have a look in the chat as well, and these things will be there too. So that is where everything is going to be. And your mentors have all got access to this as well. And now the next slides are the All Mentors slides. So the slides that we're about to go into now, these are the ones that your All Mentors will have in school. And so this is, after the title slide, this is the first slide that your mentors will have. And it's a slide that talks them through how to navigate through the professional learning. So first of all, there's an introduction video that essentially says what I'm saying now, how it is that they should work through. Then we've got a few things that we want all of them to do. There are a couple of updates, so a couple of things that have changed this year. So we want them to read through those updates. Then we want everybody to have another look at the vision of how student teachers learn. So a read through it and some chance to reflect. And we're going to do this with you all now, so you know what you're expecting from us. And then we've got a new document, which is called the Principles of Mentoring. And we want them to have a read through the Principles of Mentoring and reflect on that in the light of their role. And again, we're going to do all of these things together this evening. Then point 5, there is a choice. So they can select and engage with one of these two topics. So they can choose supporting lesson planning and evaluation or feedback conversations. Obviously, they can do both if they want to, but in terms of the amount of time that we know mentors are likely to have, we'd recommend picking one. Now, as senior mentors, you've got a choice here. You can specify to your mentors which one you want them to do, if you would like to. So if you think, actually, I feel like my mentors' feedback conversations are going really well. Sometimes when I'm doing my planning checks, I've got some questions around how consistent we're being with our supporting student teachers with their lesson planning and evaluation. Maybe you're going to choose that one. If you think that you've got some mentors who could do with a bit of professional learning about feedback, you could select that one. Or you could let the mentors self-select. And again, it could be that you have all of them self-select, so they could do a little vote and you could pick the top one, or you could have some mentors that are doing one and some mentors that are doing the other. But of course, do bear that in mind when it comes to checking in with them, that you might then need to do 2 check-ins if you've got mentors that have chosen different things to do. So as a senior mentor, you can let them choose, or you can specify depending on the needs of your mentors. Then point 6, there are some useful links and documents. And then point 7, they've got their own feedback form as well. This is a new way of us doing professional learning. We've tried to respond to feedback to make it more flexible, but if it's not working, that's fine. Like, let us know and we can go back to doing a more traditional online session that's then recorded. So do encourage your mentors to engage with this and then have them give us some feedback, and also you give us feedback as well. Maybe this flexibility isn't actually what you wanted. We're trying to help out as best we can with making the professional learning as accessible as possible. We're not going to get it right all of the time. So do encourage them to complete that feedback form as well. So this is the introductory video. So in this video, we essentially say those things where we say, this is how you're going to work through it. Everybody's got to do the beginning bits, and then you get to choose, or your senior mentor might have told you which one. So there's a video that they will watch. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague Fiona, who's going to do the first of our updates. So this is the first section that they come to, where we've got a couple of updates on things that are new to the partnership.
Thank you, Sian. Okay, so after some a year's worth of work around what the most important information is that comes through to you regarding our our students in a sense of understanding them and looking at some of the feedback we were having from schools and from mentors as part of our strategic well-being group that we have at the university, it was decided that actually putting together a one-page profile would be a really good idea. And many of our schools were actually doing something similar to this anyway in their own way. So partly this is where some of the ideas came from. So this is the profile that you can see on your screen that has been created. So the students, thank you, Sian, the students will have been asked to fill this in and bring this with them for the start of placement 2. So they will have arrived with a physical copy of this. It will need to go up on the Pebble Pad, but we appreciate not all mentors and senior mentors are currently linked. That is still a quick work in progress, which I know Rachel is behind the scenes working very hard on. So it won't be too long till that is completed. But to ensure you had access in this week, we asked all students to arrive with a physical copy. So please, by all means, ask to see this. It is primarily to allow the students to reflect a little bit about themselves. And as you can see from Sian sort of moving the screen, there are 6 main boxes looking at things like what is great about me, my views of education, things that help me learn well, my commitments and interests outside of teaching, something I'm most excited about, and something I'm nervous about. And this would allow early conversations with mentors particularly, and for yourselves when you start to get to know the students. But the intention is this works at a mentor and student level. And again, it's just a way in to allow the mentor to sort of get to know that individual, particularly things around what helps me, and maybe anything outside of work, outside of interests and maybe outside of commitments. Anything that is more significant that you would expect to be confidential will appear on an ISP. So this is not for students to divulge any particularly confidential information. So any students who have additional needs will have already been met with, and you will have received from Mark the letter that outlines what that is. And they were sent out 2 weeks ago and last week across those 2-week period. So you will already have that information. So this is very much a broader brushstroke to allow the students to share with you some interesting information about themselves. As we said before, it's an opportunity for you to start a discussion with your students. And for those of you who were with us in placement 1, hopefully you will have seen the benefit from this. There was some very positive feedback around the use of this. This also replaces on the PLP the first tab that initially had a lot of information about their profile, their educational history. And again, we had a lot of comments going, what's the point in putting it in? Is it relevant? Is it necessary? Do people even look at it? So this has replaced that part. So if you are new to CP2 and you did not have students in CP1, when you do have access to the PLP, you will be able to see that actually that information itself has changed in what we ask the students to provide. Okay, Sian, is there anything else you would like to add to that?
The only thing that I've just popped it in the chat as well is that if senior mentors are expecting BA student teachers, you might not have received the ISPs yet. So don't worry if you yes, because the BA placement is just a little bit further ahead. But yeah, no, I think apart from that, that's everything. Thanks, Fiona.
Lovely, thank you.
So now, hopefully, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Liz. Liz, are you with us?
I am.
Hello, Pranam Dalit.
Hello. Hi everybody. So at the heart of our partnership and mentoring is our vision for how student teachers learn. And so one of the things we want to encourage our mentors to do is to reflect again on that vision. Obviously, our student teachers have lots of different knowledge. There's the intellectual knowledge, and as mentors, it's really important to support the students in recognizing the link between theory and practice. And as senior mentors, it's really good to encourage that discussion with your mentors. How can they do that? How can they be the bridge between that theory and practice? So it's really good to encourage your mentors to think of some questions that they could use when having their meetings with their students to develop that aspect of how student teachers learn. So encourage them to look at the vision, and you'll find that in the clinical practice guide. I think it's in, oh, there it is. It's in the appendix. Appendix 2 for the PGCEs. Is it appendix 1 for the BAs? There we are.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. And remember, you can click on it. So if you're doing lots of scrolling, you can just click and it'll take you there.
So again, it's really good to encourage your mentors to read that, become familiar with it, and then to talk about the different aspects. What does knowledge about learners mean, and how can your mentors encourage that with your students? What questions could they ask? It's all about placing the pupils at the centre. So you could be asking them, your mentors, to use questions within their mentor meetings about, what do you know about the class? How has this knowledge about the class influenced your planning? You can use some of these questions then on the PLP themselves. So when the students have uploaded a plan, encourage your mentors to actually use some questions in the comment section of the PLP to start the students thinking a little bit more deeply about how knowledge of the learners is influencing their planning. Another one then is knowledge gained through teaching. And of course, this is, a powerful source of professional knowledge. When the student teachers plan and teach, evaluate their lessons, mentors play a crucial role by structuring that post-lesson discussion, focusing on the impact, not just the student's performance, but really encouraging your mentors to use the questions to ask them, well, why do you think this happened in the lesson? What impact did this have on the learning? And if you can do that, then with each of those elements, with our vision, I think then that will help the students progress in their practice. Is there anything else to add, Sean?
No, I don't think so. I think that was great. Thank you, Liz. So the vision is not super long. I think there's the kind of terminology there that Liz was taking us through at the bottom as well. But yeah, we would really encourage mentors and senior mentors to have a read through and reflect on how it aligns with their current understanding. And I think one of the things that always strikes me is how different this is from when I did my teacher training. And I think sometimes as teacher educators, which we all are, and as all of our mentors are, we sometimes need to catch ourselves in that perhaps our preconceptions of what that might mean. The idea that my personal knowledge and beliefs would have an impact on my teaching was quite foreign, I think, when I was doing teacher training, teacher education. Whereas now, obviously, we know things have moved forward since I did my teacher training. And we know that that can have a huge impact on a student teacher's progress. So again, if you're doing this task with your mentors, so if you've decided to have some time together and talk it through, it would be really interesting to explore some of our own ideas about how we were trained perhaps, and how we viewed teacher education as a student teacher, and how that might have changed as a mentor. Because sometimes it's very easy to slip into what we had when we were training. Thank you, Liz. Okay, so Our next thing, which is a new thing, is the principles of mentoring. So I want to take a minute just to have a chat through what the principles of mentoring are, and where they came from. So we as a partnership have been talking about how can we develop mentoring across the partnership and improve as a partnership and get better at doing mentoring. And that's something that is probably always going to be on our partnership improvement plan. It's always going to be something that we are all working towards. And I'm sure you will recognize that in terms of how you have teachers and mentors in school. We're never done, are we? We're never going to be finished with perfect mentors in every single classroom, just like we're never going to have perfect teachers in every single classroom. There's no such thing. And when we started to reflect on this, one of the things that we came across was quite a divergence in opinions and views around actually what were the key principles of mentoring. What were the things that we would want and expect every mentor to believe, to do, to be aiming for in their classroom? And we realised that we didn't have a common understanding, a shared understanding of what it was we were actually working towards as a team, all dedicated to try and improve mentoring. So last year, I've already forgotten what date that was, 24, 25, there was a project put together along with some kind funding from some of the consortia. So a huge thank you to that. And lots of your schools may have been involved with this project. I can see a couple of familiar names in the chat as well, where we got a group of schools together, a mixture of lead schools and clinical practice schools, and we talked about what are some of the things that make us as a partnership, our views on mentoring consistent. What are some of the things we would hope that every mentor is aiming for, is working towards? And this is where we came up with this document called the Principles of Mentoring. I'm going to show you what it looks like here. I can take very limited credit for this because a lot of the thinking and the hard work came from our schools, and then it's also been to some of our research partners, to some of our university staff, and we've got, you'll probably see in the title it says final. There were about 10 versions. I'm sure some of you will empathise with trying to create a shared document and the number of iterations it went through. So these are our principles of mentoring to support thinking deeply and critically about educational practice. And essentially, they're divided into this idea of values and dispositions. Who do I need to be as a mentor? The practice knowledge that we need. So we need to know certain things in order to mentor well. And then some teacher educational approaches. So things that we need to do. So all that we are asking mentors to do, I'm going to flip back to my slides here, is we're just going to ask them to reflect, to read through and then reflect on the principles of mentoring. And I've had a couple of senior mentors say to me, but Sian, what do you actually want me to do with this? And the answer is, at the moment, we're not quite sure where this is going to go, but we do know that we want to get more feedback, more opinions, and to see whether these principles resonate with mentors that are doing the job in the classrooms. So I would like mentors to reflect on what it means for their mentoring practice, and then are there any professional learning needs arising from this? So are there some things on the list that perhaps mentors feel like, actually, that doesn't apply to me, or actually, I didn't realise I was meant to be doing that. So let's dive in, and I can see that Rachel's popped them in the chat. Thank you so much. So I'm going to give you a minute, either click on the link in the chat and open that up, or you can open it through the team site like I showed you earlier, or I will sort of scroll down slowly on the screen, so if you want to read it on the screen. And let's take a moment just to read through. And you'll notice that bottom "so that" box, that was feedback from one of our schools. You're telling me all this stuff, but what does it mean? Well, why are we doing this? So we've added a bit of "so that" along the bottom. Now, I'm going to be a bold and brave facilitator and ask for some thoughts in the chat here. There's only 22 people in this room, so please don't assume that somebody else will pop something in there. I'd be really interested, is there anything in these principles of mentoring that resonates with you? Is there anything that you think your mentors do particularly well, or anything that, in fact, you think is particularly challenging? So is there anything in these principles that resonates with you? I would love to hear your thoughts if you could pop those in the chat for me now.
Nothing in there yet, Sian.
That's okay. People need time to craft their beautiful answers.
Yes, that's true.
Now I'm looking through and I think I'm too close to it. But I do remember in one of our conversations, it wasn't even that early on, we were on about version 5 or 6 already, and someone said, Sian, there's nothing about modelling or scaffolding teaching practice in here. And you know when you've spent time on something and you've written loads of stuff and you think, surely there must be. And I went through and I thought, you know what? No, they're right. And it's funny, isn't it, how sometimes breaking things down into its parts can be really challenging. So yeah, I can see that we've got a comment. Thank you so much, Tina. You are much appreciated. The how-to column is key. Too much time is said you need to do this, but not enough on how. Yeah, absolutely. This idea of here are all of these things you have to do, but actually we're just going to expect you to be able to do it because now you are a mentor. Cares and respects the student teachers and committed to giving them time and supporting them. Yeah, this idea, and it's quite a deliberate choice as well to have that one be the top one as well. Like originally it was a little bit lower down, and a couple of schools gave the feedback that they thought care and respect was absolutely the most important thing, so needed to be up there. The time needed can be challenging with a full teaching timetable. Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. And I think in some ways this is partly why we wanted to put this together as well. Being a mentor is actually quite a challenge. Well, I say that like it's a surprise, is an incredibly challenging job. And I think we all know that as senior mentors and as teacher educators in the virtual room. And sometimes when we actually break it all down into everything that a mentor is and a mentor does, it can almost shine a light on the fact that maybe we do need more time for this. And obviously I know that that's very hard at the moment, but we're working on it in terms of can we improve the status of mentors and mentoring in schools? Can we access any funding for it? There's all sorts of avenues that we're looking down. Mentors are excellent role models, not just in the classroom, but in wider school life. Yes, thank you, R. Williams from Bishopston. We sometimes forget that, don't we? We focus on the teaching, but actually the student teachers are looking at everything. They're looking at how the mentor interacts completely. It takes a whole school commitment to ITE for it to have the most impact. G. Bustle from Corpus Christi. Yes, I completely agree with you. And again, you will be in different places in your schools as well. Like some schools, especially schools that are lead schools, will have significantly more student teachers. Some of our schools might only have 2 student teachers. And again, that can be quite hard to get the voice of ITE heard sometimes. Whereas when there's a whole suite of student teachers there, that's challenging as well, because there's so many of them that it can be challenging from other perspectives. Anthony from Monmouth, mentors struggle with finding the balance of transparency and openness. Yes, especially in the final decisions and reviews for QTS. Essentially, finding the tone, being fully objective with people they've built a very close relationship. Yeah, and hopefully you see that reflected, this idea of this dual role, supporting but also assessing. And in our top tip sessions about progress reviews and learning and teaching observations, we go into that in some detail, partly because sometimes mentors do find it really hard, and then that becomes hard for the student teachers because they feel like the feedback they're getting kind of verbally doesn't match up with the feedback that they get on their learning and teaching observations and on their progress reviews. And we don't underestimate this idea of judge mentoring, they call it in the literature, where you are a mentor, you are a helper, but you are also essentially judging them. So again, for you guys as senior mentors, I think this is interesting to have a look at and reflect on ourselves, but hopefully the real learning is going to come from your mentors having a look at this and seeing, are there any bits that don't resonate with them? Or are there any bits that as a school you feel like, actually, we haven't done that, or we don't do that? And again, you can talk to your university tutor about this, but it might be that there are some pockets there where mentors feel like they might benefit from professional learning on specific things. So probably we'll be doing more of this to come in future years, but for now, we're just asking mentors to read and reflect. What does it mean in their context, and do they have any professional learning needs? Okay, so now the next section, so all of the ones that they've just done, let me zoom out so you can see. So the mental professional learning starts here. So they'll have done this slide and they'll have watched the video. Then they'll have thought about the one-page introductions and the vision and the principles of mentoring. So everybody, we want to do all of those things for that kind of updates. Then here, this is where they've got the choice. So they can choose whether to focus on lesson planning and evaluation or feedback conversations. And for this, I'm going to hand over to Fiona.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sian. So there is a series of slides that support this option that are both available in the clinical practice guide as well as within the material where Sian pointed you towards at the start of this session. So one of those choices, or if you direct your mentors to look specifically at this, could be lesson planning and evaluation. We spend a lot of time planning with our students, and it can be a real challenge for the students to learn how to plan and evaluate, and sort of the intentions behind why planning needs to be supported. And one of the sort of starting points on this slide is to ask your mentor, to reflect on some or all of those questions. Again, this is where you have some choice. It might be you have a group of very experienced mentors and you are sort of doing this to pull focus on planning and sort of fine tune some elements, or it could be that you have some very new mentors in your group, and part of that is really supporting them understanding how important this element is of the IT provision. So again, you can draw them to all 4 questions, or you can maybe select some of those questions, and they are there to prompt conversation, prompt discussion. There is also, as you can see in question 4, a video to watch about how planning aligns to your wider practice. So the intention is to use this as a starting point to get them to reflect on the importance of why we need to plan and evaluate, and some of the challenges maybe the student teachers face. I think, is it worth maybe just asking a few quick questions about, maybe in the chat, what do you feel might be some of the answers to those questions? Okay, just while you're thinking, maybe just to pull on some of those points, that what challenges do novice tutors teachers face when planning and evaluating? It's actually knowing sometimes what to plan. We talk a lot about planning for the learning and not just planning for the content of the lesson. So you might find plans are very directed around the subject knowledge and the tasks they're producing. Sometimes student teachers will plan through the PowerPoint, and they will see the PowerPoint as the plan, whereas we would advocate the PowerPoint as a resource that supports the planning. The planning is that bigger picture around the student and pupil needs and the class needs, as well as the content and progress. And thank you, Tim. I think you make some really good points there. This is a key part of the whole course. Absolutely. If they can't plan and they can't put their ideas down on paper as to what they think that lesson looks like, as with evaluating to ensure learning is moved forward, then this whole process falls apart. And sometimes I think Sian's put a point in there, not knowing the curriculum of the school or the learners, having missed previous lessons and not knowing prior content can be really tricky for the students to just pick up a class or not know where they've come from. And they don't always ask the right questions to find out that information. So I think sometimes there's an assumption that student teachers possibly should know more than they do, and sometimes that student teachers don't feel they can ask the questions they need to ask in order to help them in that planning process. As we know as well, planning is a skill that a senior member of staff, a practicing teacher who's been 2, 3, 4 years into the process, as well as maybe 15, 20 years into the process, plans very differently. There is a lot of things that you will naturally do as an experienced teacher where you can pull and see what's going to go wrong before it even happens. And again, you can maybe make small tweaks that can have quite significant impacts on your pupils' learning and progress. Our student teachers don't have this capacity and they need to learn this, and that comes with time, which again is why that process of planning becomes so important. I'm just going to pause there because I can see a couple more things are popping into the chat. Yes, you're right, Tim. They often evaluate themselves instead of the progress of pupils. And the scaffolding, again, checking the scaffolding of the plans and looking at the plans with your student teachers and encouraging particularly the mentors to look at planning. Again, we're not asking mentors to look at every single plan. That is very much not the request, but they should be planning with student teachers, and they should be certainly looking at some of the plans. So the conversation, I think, and Sian, feel free to jump in here if you want to. But a lot of the time, the feedback we get from mentors is, oh, I sit and I talk with them and we go over everything. But then what transfers from the talking onto the actual plan is quite different, or that there are elements missed that could have been picked up looking before the planning had taken place that could have impacted the teaching and the lesson itself. Very much we do advocate, and schools are within their rights, mentors are within their rights to sort of ask plans in advance. The PLP allows for this beautifully because you don't need to send plans back and forth, because the students can plan within the PLP template, which means a mentor can dip in and out and access that planning at any point in time. And again, comments on one plan, you don't need to comment on every single plan, because comments, be it verbal or written, can be the expectation at a postgraduate level, and possibly more supported at the BA level, is that they can take some of those ideas and apply them across to other elements of their lessons. So I'm just going to stop there. So in my senior mentor meeting today, our students were able to reflect very accurately on their progress they've made in their planning skills, e.g. content has moved to skills and progress. Brilliant. This approach reflection is very encouraging for the start. So that is absolutely a really lovely reflection. Thank you. And I know from a postgraduate primary secondary perspective, we have spent a lot of time in these last 3 weeks getting the students to reflect, asking them to really think about their planning and their planning needs and how they move forward. So that is very encouraging to hear that has maybe has come through in the senior mentor meetings today. Thank you for sharing that. Sian, could you possibly move to the next slide, please? Okay, so this part is really, really critically important, and it sort of is a step back, I guess, to some degree from what we've just said, but this idea that team planning and teaching comes first, be it the start of the first placement or the second placement, because again, understanding the class needs, the differentiation needs, which I agree from my colleague from CCYD, where to pitch the lesson in terms of differentiation pace can be really challenging because they don't know their classes yet. They don't know the content. They don't know who who has had what before the session, who has taught what, and where those pupils and those learners are. And it can be very hard for them to pick up that knowledge very quickly. So that ability to model what is expected is the intention of team planning and teaching. And it's very deliberate where it says team planning and teaching. It's not just team teaching, because again, the mentor and student can sit down and go through a plan and model what that plan should look like, write up that plan and decide who is going to do what element of that delivery, and then be able to reflect and evaluate how effective that lesson was and for what reasons. Again, not just reflecting on the student teacher's ability to do that lesson and their sort of teaching ability, but the progress that's then seen in the learners. So you can, again, this section asks you to sort of talk through why student teachers might need support, and moving them from individual lesson plans to midterm and long-term planning, how to use the PLP as a lesson template, and there is the top tips support that, and how to take maybe departmental schemes and plans and sort of more unit maps and things like that to support the planning. So as Shana's just popped up there are a number of different tasks and videos that support this section. Within this this is a screen grab, obviously. So within the full planning, there are videos that are embedded where you can see the play icon, and you can decide which ones you want to pop into, or maybe direct your mentors towards, or if it's a free rein, then you can feedback on which ones they looked at and why. So again, it's designed to be very flexible to the wider needs of your teaching group. But as Tim has said, the planning and evaluating is central to everything that we do with our student teachers, and it's certainly something we have an eye on. I know in secondary, if I might just speak to secondary, because I don't think, Sian, the challenge is possibly quite the same in primary, but I know in our secondary context, we sometimes struggle because our student teachers will be with multiple teachers, not just their mentor, and that itself can cause some challenges around planning and supporting planning. And so from a secondary team perspective, there's going to be a much bigger look at planning in CP2, and we're going to be asking senior mentors to actually go in and check in the next couple of weeks the quality of the planning to flag any early concerns as part of that moving from aware to capable. But I think from discussions, that's not quite necessarily the same challenge in primary, because they possibly have a more consistent contact person being in the same classroom the whole time. So that's a very unique position. So can I just jump in a sec, Fiona?
Yeah, please do, Sian. Because just to say that if you are aware that that's an issue in your school, so if you know that you quite often have people planning with student teachers who are not mentors, then perhaps this might be a good activity to do with them as well. And again, I know that's really hard from a time perspective, but ultimately it will hopefully save you time by preempting any issues. If we can make sure that everybody is on the same page and they know what we mean by team planning and team teaching. So that might be something to put on your to-do list if you know that's an issue in your school, to go and speak to senior leadership or to make some time, depending on your responsibilities, to be able to access that group of teachers as well.
Brilliant. And then in the last couple of slides, we just move forward, there's 2 slides there that support what you can do as part of the mentor meeting. So again, drawing the attention to the mentors, we get a lot of feedback that very often mentor meetings are spent just planning, but a lot of talking about planning, whereas there are multiple opportunities here for the mentors to ask to see the PLP and maybe get an example of a lesson plan up that the student teacher has delivered and talk through elements of it that maybe then can filter into other plans. How they are working on fundamental aspects of planning, basically what support, maybe around the evaluations, checking that they're evaluating. As I agree, we've said several times in different contexts, we are very time poor in this role, be it a senior mentor, a mentor, there is real challenges there. So using that time effectively is really critical. So we would certainly be advocating the messages coming through that these mentor meetings are there to be used in a much more broader context of an overview of the week, an overview of planning, and picking up any good practice and things that can be reiterated and supported, but anything that needs, again, additional focuses, which can then feed into some R&E time. So I think there's a second slide as well, isn't there, Sian? Yeah, thank you. And again, it reiterates some questions, some sort of ideas there with regards to, as the student teacher develops their planning, the different conversations that can take place and to consider during those meetings. So I think the message here, as well as this being an opportunity for a big focus, is also looking at how are your mentors actually using that time and supporting them in developing the ability to use that time particularly effectively. And then again, to support that, there are a series of videos that you can use as training material to support your mentors with regards to how effective they use that mentor meeting. And that's been, again, a big message to our students as well in this interplacement. So hopefully that will feed forward. Thank you, Sian. I think that is my last slide.
Yes, fantastic. Yep. Thank you, Fiona.
That's okay.
So it's worth saying as well, I think, at this point, that if you want to make edits or changes to these slides, you absolutely can do that. We've sort of put lots of stuff on there, loads of different options, different videos, different focuses. And whilst it probably would be interesting to watch all of the videos and look at all of them, if you would rather pick one thing, so say you feel like actually team planning and teaching is going quite well, but your mentor meetings, you're not sure how effectively they're being used, specifically around planning, perhaps pick that section and then delve deeper into that. So sometimes I think we put loads of content in this stuff and we sort of rush through to work through it, and actually we would be better off doing a little bit less and getting a little bit deeper. So have a think about your mentors, where they're at on their journey of mentoring and which focuses might be most appropriate for them. And then the same goes for, you might actually have different challenges within your mentoring team even. So I think the question around planning, how much people are planning from scratch versus how much they're using existing schemes of work and things like that, that can vary quite dramatically department by department or year group by year group. I know that often in primary school, those who are teaching phonics and maybe a math scheme might have different challenges to those that are planning their English from scratch, for example. Fiona, have you got your hand up? Oh, no, sorry, I thought you did. I thought you were going to weigh in there.
I will in a minute when you finished your point.
So it's worth kind of thinking about, are there these sort of little subgroups of mentors as well? And another way you could potentially do it is by getting those groups of people together. So if there are year groups or departments that have particular challenges, I know that planning in early years can sometimes be something mentors find challenging, how to support student teachers with that. So could you get a couple of teachers together who've got experience of that, and they could focus on that? So yeah, you can tailor this as much or as little as you want. If you're thinking, gosh, I've not got time for this at all, then you can just send this to them as it is and let your mentors self-select and then have a chance to debrief and reflect on it. If you do have a little bit of time to think and prepare, perhaps pick out one section that you think is going to be the highest leverage thing for your mentors in your school. Fiona.
I was just to remind that everyone as well that within the PLP, under every section of the plan, of the learning and teaching plan, are little hyperlinks where you can click and you can see what should be going into that box. So if your mentors are ever unsure about what a plan should look like, then the general information of what should be contained separate to sort of subject specific knowledge or age phase specific knowledge is there for you to use and model with the students. So there shouldn't really be a situation where mentors will say, I don't know what's expected of the plan, because it is in there and it is very much part of mentor training. And this is why, again, it's one of these two focuses that we would ask you to look at with your mentors to support, as we say, the most critical aspect of training to teach, which is the ability to plan and evaluate to ensure everyone's catered for and that learning is moved forward consistently and correctly for the needs of all the class. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. So then our second section is feedback conversations. So as I say, it might be that you choose planning and you're not going to focus on this, or maybe you're thinking, actually, I feel like we've worked a lot on planning. I think feedback conversations would be better for us. So the first The first thing that we've got another video where we've got some mentors discussing different approaches to giving a student-teacher feedback. So this activity is simply watching this video and considering the different approaches, and if there are any that are new, are there any that they would like to try this year? And again, if you've got these people who aren't mentors, but who are giving feedback to student teachers, perhaps you could share this professional learning with them. So I know that that is often the case in secondary, as Fiona mentioned. Also, potentially, if you have a job share where only one of them has attended the mentor training, this might be a useful thing for them to have some training on as well, because perhaps that job share is giving a little bit of feedback, even if they're not doing the sort of formal learning and teaching observations. So these 4 different approaches, and these you might recognise these because this is what we've been talking to mentors about in our quality enhancement conversations. So we've been asking mentors, what is their approach to feedback conversations? And a lot of them are saying that the feedback conversations that they have are mentor-led. Sometimes we talk about how that can change throughout the conversations and throughout the placement. But ultimately, I think sometimes when we are time poor, we go with the most efficient way of giving feedback, which can be a little bit like me saying, here's everything you did well, and here are the things that you need to improve. And whilst that might be most efficient short term, what we're not necessarily doing is allowing the student teachers time for critical reflection and ultimately being able to have these critical thoughts themselves without somebody being there holding their hand through the process. So there are some different ways that you could approach this slide. You could have them watch the video and then reflect on these questions. It might be that you've got some concrete examples from your own practice, or your mentors might have some examples of when they've used different types of feedback. You could ask your mentors to discuss and compare the different approaches. And then when mentors have had a chance to reflect on these different approaches to giving feedback, it's a good idea to facilitate their independent reflection using this prompt question on the slide. So when and why might you use these approaches? And then we've got this other box here, these things that they might want to consider. And this is deliberately animated to appear a little bit later, because I think essentially this is sort of the answers, isn't it? And these are some of the things that might affect how a mentor gives feedback. I am going to give you a minute just to have a read through that, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop and blow my nose. Apologies, everybody. I'm so sorry, but you know, it's winter, isn't it, in Wales? Here we are. And what we are finding during our QE visits is that mentors aren't necessarily thinking about this stuff in the day-to-day. When we sit and have a conversation, they say things like, oh, you know what? I do know about the clinical reasoning approach, or yes, I have heard about giving delayed feedback and letting the student teacher reflect first, but I just haven't thought to do it yet. And again, I understand why. It's because we're all super busy and we fall back into the habits of the things that we do regularly. But actually, these different ways of giving feedback can be incredibly powerful given the different needs of the student teacher. If they are progressing really well and you're saying that they are kind of on track to be above where we would expect them to be, beyond capable QTS plus, then actually, do they really need that sort of real mentor-led stuff? Or would they be better off reflecting in a way that's more in line with the induction descriptors? And again, I think sometimes just taking that little moment to pause, take a step back and reflect on how we're actually giving feedback can have some really big, very quick gains for mentors. So we also have got a bit more of a focus on clinical reasoning. Now, for some of you, you might be thinking, why are they still banging on about clinical reasoning? We've been doing this for a long time. And yes, however, it doesn't seem to be filtering down to mentors. So when we're asking mentors about clinical reasoning, a lot of mentors are still saying, I don't know what this is, or no, I don't do that. I haven't tried it. So again, we've put this here in professional learning, and we want to have a bit more of a focus on the why. So I think these considerations are quite interesting here. So this idea of the fact that sometimes when we're using the clinical reasoning approach, that is supporting their development in terms of independence, reflectiveness, and criticality. And again, this idea that if student teachers aren't able to do this, are they really working at a capable level? And I think almost all of you will probably have done a progress review with a student teacher before. It is very challenging, isn't it, to go through every single one of those professional standards with any level of depth in a progress review. We're sort of using lots of information that we've got. We're using proxies so that we're trying our very best to get this picture of what a student teacher is working at. But actually, really, we want this to be happening consistently and not just when they're writing a synthesis of progress. And if mentors aren't using some of these clinical reasoning approaches, it's likely that the student teachers aren't having much of a chance to practice these skills. And then we're maybe not quite at the level that we would be hoping they would be in order to be capable. So I've got these slides here, which probably are going to be familiar to most of you. So this definition of clinical reasoning, this approach that, oh, I've done something funny on the screen and there you are, approach that supports student teachers to make well-judged decisions in practice-based contexts, to become these adaptive experts. And essentially, this is where we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to the point where in September, or in a couple of years' time, if they're on the BA, when they have their own class and they don't have someone standing with them saying, these are the things you should have done differently, they're beginning to use those analytical and intuitive processes to make the best decisions that they can make. And there's these 4 elements to it here. This idea of respectful and reciprocal dialogue. So listening, open dialogue, and skillful prompting. It's worth noting as well at this point that this clinical reasoning approach does also benefit the mentor as a reflective practitioner, as well as the student teacher. If we think back to the principles of mentoring that I showed you a little bit earlier, these things complement each other quite nicely. This idea of respect and care, and then we've got this respectful and reciprocal dialogue. And I think that idea that when a student teacher, oh, I can hear a bit of feedback. If people could just mute their mics. This is where I think my voice doesn't sound like that, does it? But clearly it does. This idea that when a student teacher might be challenging some assumptions of the mentor, it isn't something that is personal. It's a reciprocal dialogue. It isn't them criticizing. It's them having some questions about something that is in front of them. This idea of iterative use of data and evidence. So drawing on classroom data and theory. And this is where you can totally see how this links in with planning as well, doesn't it? All of those discussions around how we might better use our mentor meetings to support student teachers planning. It could be that we reflect on that here as well. When they're saying that they've got an evaluation in the classroom, actually, what is the evidence that they've got for that? And again, asking that question, what's your evidence for saying that? And encouraging the student teachers to have data and evidence to back up their assumptions and back up the things that they're saying. And then that links into this articulation of their reasoning. We can see their learning. And it also is a way that mentors can make their tacit knowledge accessible. I think this is really interesting because sometimes this can be where mentors who are absolutely fantastic teachers can sometimes struggle when they first step into mentoring because so much of their knowledge is tacit. So much of it is automated. So much of it is inherent in everything that they are and do in the classroom that actually then when they've got somebody asking them questions, they can find it challenging sometimes to articulate reasoning. Sometimes you might have a newer teacher, a teacher who's only been teaching a few years, who might be brilliant at this. And it's likely that that's because they're still thinking quite hard about what it is that they're saying and doing. But again, we want the student teachers to be able to articulate their reasoning. It's not just, oh, I'm doing this because this is a good thing to do. I'm doing it because AFL. I'm doing it because differentiation. No, actually, what is the evidence behind that? What's the data behind it? And can you explain that clearly? And then this idea of probing personal assumptions and theories. So we want student teachers who've got this critical orientation towards improving teaching. And again, this might also be something that is beneficial for mentors as well. Mentors will often say to me, the reason that I like being a mentor is because it helps me as a practitioner. I not necessarily learn new things from the student teachers, although absolutely you can learn new things from the student teachers, but I learn new things about myself as a mentor and as a teacher. And they have me question my personal assumptions, and they introduce me towards new ideas and new perspectives. So we've got a few questions then on the next couple of slides. So there are a couple of questions there focusing on key aspects of practice and pupil learning. And then some questions that are more focused on the use of evidence. And then some questions to check and develop their understanding. And then some questions that encourage the testing of ideas, assumptions, and decisions. So these two slides, I'm going to flick back one. So this one and this one are slides for your mentors to use with your student teacher. So this could be another approach that you could have. You could say, okay, we're going to focus on clinical reasoning this time. That's what I'm going to ask my mentors to focus on. And you could ask them to use some of the clinical reasoning prompts in their feedback to student teachers. And then you could get your mentors together to talk about how that went with their clinical reasoning prompts. Which ones did you use? How did it go? Did you feel like actually you were asking your student teacher to play guess what's in your head? Or actually was it something that really moved their thinking forward? Did some student teachers respond better than others? And be able to have that conversation then. Okay, next time I'm going to try using the what would happen if question prompt. So that's another focus that you could go for. And then the final thing in this feedback conversations bit. So the feedback conversations, we sort of split into three sections. We've got this bit at the beginning that's sort of focused on different types of conversations. Then we've got the clinical reasoning section. So you could go in on clinical reasoning. And then we've got this pit stop mentoring approach. Now, some of you might never have heard of pit stop mentoring. For others, some of you might be using this as an approach in school, because I think this has come to us through some of our senior mentors and mentors who've shared this approach with us. So if I just open up a blog post that I hopefully have got open, here we go, and I'm going to pop this link in the chat as well. So this is a blog post, and we also have the original paper as well, depending on which one your mentors would prefer, which essentially talks about what pit stop mentoring is: precise, insightful, and timely feedback, and alternatively described by one of our student teachers as pause in teaching. And essentially it's an in-lesson learning conversation between the mentor and the mentee, lasting for about a minute, 30 to 60 seconds, and occurring once or twice during the lesson. I've also heard this referred to as real-time coaching or live coaching or like live mentoring or something like that. And essentially it is where everything that you are doing in the lesson, you are acting, your student teacher is teaching, and there's a problem of some kind that comes up, or you notice an opportunity to give feedback. Your mentor can go and have a little mini chat with the student teacher, give them that feedback, and then the lesson kind of carries on. So I'd be interested, has anybody used it in their school? Does anybody use pit stop mentoring? And can you think of any times when it could be useful? If you could just take a minute to pop your thoughts in the chat. So yeah, Tim, can all the links be sent in one email? Yeah, I think we can absolutely sort that out. They are all linked in the team site. So the place where I showed you before here in this Documents for All Mentors, there's the link to the website there. I'm just popping the things in the chat as well, because I know that sometimes people don't have access to the team site and I want them to be able to access the training. But yes, we can send them in an email as well.
Sian, there's also a question Tim asks, is there linking questions that make this easier? He popped that in when you were talking about clinical reasoning, but I just wanted to clarify what he meant by that question, because I wasn't sure. I don't know, Tim, if you wanted to ask the question.
Sorry, that was before the prompts came up. I was So
Oh, right,
you
we're
answered it
race
fine.
to the 2 questions. No, that's fine. That's just
Did I answer it already, Tim, with my wonderful slides?
You did, yeah.
Fantastic.
So do the slides get sent through as well? Because when you say Teams, our school system's a nightmare with linking to Teams. We have to log in, log out, log out. That's why it's always easier to get it separately.
So the slides are quite big.
All right, okay.
is the problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tim, if you don't have access, maybe
You
drop
do,
me
it's
an
just
email and
cumbersome.
I'll see if I
Yeah.
can do like a file transfer to you, or your university tutor should be able to do that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, I would love to send it all out. We have kind of explored whether I could make my slides smaller, but it turns out that they are a bit big to send out as an attach all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at this point, it can be useful to ask, has anybody used this type of mentoring? And then we've got a couple of scenarios here as well. So I don't know if you want to have a little moment to read through. We've got 3 scenarios here, and I think that these can sort of split up quite sensibly for me. This idea that you might have some sort of behavior incident that the student teacher is struggling with. There might be a safety incident where something is, you can see that potentially there's going to be a problem of some kind, or there could be a key learning point. You're watching, you know, those moments when you're sort of thinking, oh my gosh, I really hope they're going to say that, and then they don't say that. Yeah, so Tim, with an NQT, when people are clearly not understanding, and so I think essentially what Pit Stop Mentoring says is that it's okay to have those little conversations in the class. So we've got sort of a few kind of suggestions of answers, but obviously your mentors might have their own ideas here. So here you can see with the behaviour incident, perhaps you might pause the lesson as a mentor and then guide the student teacher to reflect on it. With a safety incident, probably you would step in immediately and stop to assure immediate safety. And the important thing with this as well is the after bit. So what Pit Stop Mentoring says is that it's not enough to intervene in the moment. You also need to have that after bit where you talk about what it is that you did and why you did it. And then the key learning point, it might be during a suitable pause or perhaps directly after the lesson to discuss the missed opportunity and model how it could be addressed. So I've got a few top tips for Pit Stop Mentoring. Number 1, keep it short and sharp. So aim for it to be under a minute, but without impacting the flow of the lessons. Number 2, plan 1, react to 1. So sometimes you can do a mentor-led pit stop where you have a pre-agreed target with your student teacher and you give them a little bit of feedback about that in the lesson. And then sometimes you might react to something that happens in the lesson. For different student teachers, those things are going to be, some of them, it could be a very difficult thing to get feedback while they're teaching. And I know that some student teachers really find that very difficult. Other student teachers find it to be much more helpful than waiting until after the lesson, and then they go, oh, you know what, I was sort of thinking that, but I didn't feel confident to stop the lesson. So actually getting that little bit of backup can be really helpful. And again, the student teacher can lead the pit stop as well. So if there's something that puzzles or surprises them during the lesson, saying to them, it's okay to ask for my advice during the lesson. And some of you are probably sitting here thinking, yeah, of course, I do this all the time with my student teacher. That's great, but we know that not all mentors do. So do kind of, if you think that this is something that your school would be open to doing, do take some time to reflect on that. This idea of learning and not fixing. So they're not kind of mini evaluations. You're not stopping and giving them loads of feedback. You're being constructive and curious, and it's kind of that in the moment learning tool. This point here around reflecting and growing. So make sure that after you've done a pit stop, that you have that post-lesson reflection and you discuss how it's affected the teaching, and then build confidence through practice as well. The more often that pit stops are used, the more natural and effective they become for both mentor and student teacher. So yeah, a few people popping some things in the chat here. So yeah, Anthony saying that you do this, something a student teacher has missed or not seeing. We agree beforehand that this kind of in-lesson dialogue is part of the relationship. Yes, Anthony, that's a really crucial point there. This idea that sometimes people might find it invasive or undermining is absolutely true. And so sometimes well, always, I would say it's really important to have a conversation with your student teacher to discuss how this is an approach that you like to use, to ask them, is it okay if I do that? I have worked with a student teacher once who got absolutely thrown whenever I tried to do this. So I just stopped doing it. It didn't work for her. It would derail her lesson. Whereas for lots of student teachers, it can be really helpful. And usually use it for including a new element or suggesting a new direction or even question a thread. Yeah, I've definitely seen it used really effectively as well, where the mentor sort of just asks a question. So like even like a simple question like, are we doing this work in our books? When the student teacher's forgotten to explain where they're going to be writing their answers on the whiteboards or in the books. There are sort of very subtle ways to do it. Fiona.
Well, I was just going to kind of bring some stuff together here, because actually thinking about the students that can and can't deal with this, that's a great connection into the one-page introduction, because they talk about how they can learn and what they like. So this is a nice opportunity as part of that dialogue with your mentors to get them to sort of talk about the different ways that mentoring can play out, and maybe a heads up on if a student might feel that would be useful or not. And then I would connect it also into planning, because if there are particularly things they've missed, be it safety, be it behavioural, or be it in the moment, as part of that post-evaluation sort of reflection, one of those questions can link back to, did you consider this at the point of planning? And if they haven't, was that missed? Was that something that now needs to feed forward? Or if they did and it didn't come to fruition in the lesson, then why? What stopped them? What happened? And where was what we call that focus point of attention? Experienced teachers can focus their attention much earlier and see the problem, whereas inexperienced teachers will get to the end of the lesson and know something wasn't quite right but couldn't fix it at the time. So again, coming back to those reflections. So this, in essence, also connects to planning and evaluating in the reflective dialogue in that mentor meeting, as well as the use of the one-page profile introduction. Sorry, and I can also see Tim has his hand up. Sian.
Oh yeah, Tim.
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned by what you're saying, is that might not quite meet the student teacher's sort of style, because if we're not developing teachers to be adaptable in the moment, then I think that's a real weakness in our profession. So I really think we do need to be adaptable, as long as we don't undermine them in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a change of direction on content, yeah, that would throw anybody. But if it's a change in direction on strategy, behavior, safety, or like you said, just a key question, I really think the student teacher, every teacher, should be able to make that change. Otherwise, we're not creating responsive teachers. We're creating teachers who just go through the hour and then realise afterwards that it wasn't good enough. So, sort of challenge that point there. That
I think it's a very
we've all
valid
got our
challenge.
Preferences, but preferences don't
definitely
go out the window if you're not going to be a good teacher. I'm afraid preferences don't really count.
Yeah.
You've got to be told in the moment. It's just the way you do it. I don't like it when teachers undermine each other, and
You're right.
that's
And I
just
think
not
it's
good
the point you picked up there, and you mentioned it in the text, is how you do it, and it's that dialogue to say when and how and what to not undermine is critical there. But I think you're absolutely right, Tim.
Thank you.
It's a really important element as a professional to be able to develop, and potentially if you link to your standards in the collaboration standards, the leadership standards, that ability to work with colleagues and take on feedback and respond to feedback professionally. What we're talking about is not, I'm the mentor, I'm telling you what you're doing wrong. It is that professional dialogue to support that student teacher because they haven't seen something in the moment, or they're not sure of the skill set they yet need in order to make progress there, or to ensure that maybe doesn't happen again. So I think you're right. It is important to challenge, and certainly I think our weaker students will struggle with that, but it doesn't mean that we don't do it, for sure, if appropriate.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then, a question in the chat. Thinking about providing opportunities for my mentors to practice this approach, would role play work? Yes, I think role play would work. I think my favourite way of doing it is to use a video, though. So a video of a lesson, and then kind of watch just like a couple of minutes of a clip, and then pause, give the mentors a chance to think about, okay, what could the intervention have been, and then perhaps role play then the intervention, because I think otherwise doing it as a pure role play or pure scenario based is quite abstract, whereas actually if you can see a classroom where lessons are happening. That can be kind of a more real example of what it could look like. I've also seen this done in a very interesting way. I will share this. It's maybe slightly off topic, but maybe not, given what we've been talking about in terms of secondary. I was once working with a school where the subject mentor, the subject specialist wasn't the mentor, and the mentor never got a chance to observe the teacher or something like that. There was some kind of where you had two people, only one of them ever got to observe, and only one of them had the subject knowledge. And what they would do is they would use a video where they recorded the lesson with obviously the student teacher's permission. And essentially, they made some suggestions sort of over the top of the video. And then the student teacher would get a chance to watch that back and reflect on that. And that seemed to work quite well for them as well. So there are loads of different variations on this. And if you have a read through the full blog post as well, there are some more sort of tips and tricks in there on that EWC website. But again, I think pit stop mentoring can be incredibly powerful. And for me, the biggest thing is sometimes I feel very frustrated when I'm watching a lesson. And obviously, as a university tutor, I don't tend to feel like I can step in because the student teacher doesn't know me very well. They're not really used to me. But when I'm watching a lesson and I can see that something is going wrong in that lesson, and I'm not stepping in to help, I'm waiting until it goes wrong and then giving the feedback afterwards. To me, that feels like such a missed opportunity for the learning of the children in that classroom. Like, if I can, as Tim says, I think maybe we've got a duty to develop enough relationship, enough trust, to be able to actually have an impact on that lesson before it starts to go wrong, or to get that learning to be a little bit better in the moment of that lesson. Then why wouldn't we be doing it? You know, let's get in there before the problem happens. So again, pit stop mentoring might be something that you want to explore with your mentors. If you wanted to just have them look at pit stop mentoring and that be your professional learning, that would be, you know, that would be okay if you feel like we're confident with other aspects of what we're talking about today. So you'll be glad to hear that we're going to finish on time, and we're coming into land here. So we've got a couple of other useful links and resources here. So there is a link to the mentor resources on our YouTube channel. We've also got the Emma and Tom Talk Teaching podcast. Quite a lot of the things that we're discussing here will also be podcast episodes. So if you want to learn a little bit more, or if you want to suggest anything to your mentors to listen to, go and have a look at that. Then we've got the clinical practice guide and appendices. So an awful lot, the clinical reasoning approach, the vision for how student teachers learn, all of this is there in the clinical practice guide and appendices. And again, we're thinking about all of these different elements all the time, and often we're just looking at those week by week guides, but actually there's more in there that we could be looking at. Oh, I can see a couple of comments in the chat. Try the video after picking up the same thing a couple of times. The impact of seeing it themselves rather than hearing it was beneficial for one of our students, a simple tool that changed practice. Absolutely. And this is something where maybe it hasn't changed, because I remember being asked to video myself when I was a student teacher, but it was a very old-fashioned video camera then. So when I was a student teacher, I remember watching a lesson and thinking, oh my goodness, is that really how I give instructions? You know, how wordy and confusing are those instructions? And then, yeah, Tim's point, we all need to try and develop Ant and Dec synergy, but it's an art form that needs a lot of work and toys on the left. I love that. We'll call it that next time. It won't be pit stop mentoring, it'll be Ant and Dec mentoring. I'll give the feedback to the EWC. So in terms of what you need to do now as senior mentors, I think it would be a good idea. Obviously, we've done it already in the session, but do continue to implement the strategies that support the vision of how student teachers learn. Have a read through the principles of mentoring in full and start to consider the needs of the mentors in your school. Is there anything that actually you think they would really benefit from professional learning on? And then number 3, plan your approach to professional learning in your context. Are you going to deliver it asynchronously? Are you going to send it out and get this, the mentors to engage with it themselves and then get them together later? Are you going to specify a particular focus? Are you going to pick one of the sections or even an element of one of the sections? What do you think will be best for the mentors in your school? And remember, if you're sat in here feeling very overwhelmed by that idea and you're thinking, gosh, I've got literally no time, you can just send it to them. Have them choose their own focus. That is perfectly okay as well. But obviously we want to give people, if you do want to tailor it more, we want to give you the freedom and the flexibility to do that. And so just before we finish, if you wouldn't mind doing our little evaluation for us here. As I say, this is a new approach to professional learning that we're trialing this year. I think that hopefully it will be better, but I don't know whether having it be a bit confusing with the asynchronous resources maybe means that it isn't better. Maybe we should just stick with the way that we've done it before, with a live session that's then recorded. Please do let us know, because we're going to be planning next year's professional learning over the next few months. And we want to hear from you what worked, what didn't work. And with that, that is the end of what I'm going to say. Can I say a huge thank you to my colleagues Fiona and Liz and